You know, many of us go before the Buddha and pray, "Please help my life become peaceful." We light the incense, we bow very sincerely. For a few minutes we are calm, then we go home. Somebody says one sentence we do not like, and the peaceful person from the temple disappears. Very fast we say, "Why do you always speak to me like that?" They answer. We answer again. A few minutes later the whole house is practicing, but not the kind of practice we intended. We laugh. Because we know this, we ask for peace. But when anger comes, we give it food. We remember what happened. Then we remember something else. Then something from last year joins the conversation. The mind is very talented. Once it begins searching for proof that somebody does not respect us, it can open the entire archive. At first maybe there was only one small thought. They do not care about me. That condition had just begun. But then we repeated it. We told a friend. Of course, we usually do not call the friend who will say, "Maybe calm down and look again." No, we call the friend who says, "You are completely right." Now the anger has water. It also has support. The condition becomes a little deeper. After a while, it does not take much. Someone asks, "Did you buy the milk?" That is all. But suddenly, we are arguing about something that happened 6 years ago. The milk has no idea how it became involved, you see. Suffering does not come from only one thing. There is the sentence from this morning, there is the tired body, there is the old resentment. There is the habit of wanting to win. Those conditions meet, and the reaction rises very quickly. So the Buddha's teaching asks us to look more deeply, not only, what did that person do to me, but also, what happened inside me after that? What did I continue to nourish? Did I nourish understanding, or did I secretly rehearse the moment when I would hurt them back? Did I speak clearly, or did I plant another sharp sentence in the relationship, then later wonder why peace would not grow there? A thought is a seed, a word is a seed. What we repeatedly remember is also a seed. And every day, knowingly or unknowingly, we are watering something. This is not about blaming ourselves. Sometimes another person truly did hurt us. Sometimes a situation is unfair. Wisdom does not ask us to pretend otherwise. But after the pain arises, we still have to ask what direction we are giving it. Because pain can become understanding. Pain can also become bitterness. Both need conditions. And this is where a life begins to change. Not when all difficult people disappear. That may take a very long time. Some of them seem quite committed. Life begins to change when we stop giving every old habit exactly what it needs. Anger rises, but perhaps we do not immediately give it our mouth. We take one breath, only one, very small. But in that breath, the old condition does not receive its usual support. Maybe we listen until the other person finishes. Maybe we recognize that we were wrong. Maybe we say, "Yes, what I did caused harm." That is how a different direction begins. At first, patience may still be weak. Of course, we have nourished anger for 10 years, and patience arrived this morning. Give it some time, give it better conditions. Little by little, we begin to recognize the old road earlier. Before the cruel sentence, before the long argument, before one difficult moment becomes a story about our entire life. And that last part is very important, because sometimes the field is not ruined. Sometimes the mind is simply exhausted, and an exhausted mind can look at one dark day, then declare that the whole future has failed. Before we believe that conclusion, we should look again. This is where we have to be careful, because when the mind is exhausted, it does not simply say, "I am tired." No, it says, "My whole life is wrong, one difficult week," and the mind is ready to write a conclusion for the next 20 years. You come home after a long day. The body is tired. The mind has been answering people since morning. Someone asks one more question, and suddenly you think, "I cannot live like this anymore." Maybe there is a real problem. Maybe something truly needs to change. But this may not be the best moment to decide the meaning of your entire life. A tired mind sees through tiredness. A frightened mind sees through fear. An angry mind sees through whatever has been burning inside it. The feeling is real, but it is not the whole field. It is one condition present in one moment. The difficulty begins when the mind turns that moment into an identity. I feel lost becomes, my life has no direction. I made a mistake becomes, I ruin everything. This relationship is painful becomes, nothing in my life will ever work. The mind adds very quickly, what happened was already painful. Then the story makes it heavier. There is the first arrow, the difficult event itself. Then there is the second arrow, everything we keep saying about what happened. And many times the second arrow remains much longer than the first. This does not mean we ignore reality. If the work is harmful, look at it honestly. If somebody is abusing us, wisdom does not tell us to stay and smile. Patience is not permission for another person to continue creating harm. But pain should not be given complete authority over every decision. Sometimes a person says, I want to leave everything. Then they sleep, they eat something warm, they sit quietly for one morning. The next day they say, maybe I do not want to leave everything, maybe I only need one day without anybody asking me for anything yesterday, the whole life had to disappear today. Perhaps soup and silence will help. The mind changes when conditions change. That is worth remembering, so when everything looks dark, do not immediately assume the whole world has become dark. Maybe the mind has not rested. Maybe it has been carrying resentment for too long. Maybe it has tried to be strong for everybody and has not had one honest moment to say, I am not doing well. Practice begins by becoming specific. Not my life is a failure, that is too large. The mind cannot work with it. Try, I am exhausted, I feel alone, I am afraid this will not improve. Now we are closer to the real seed. And when we can see the seed, we can begin to see what condition it needs. Rest, a clear conversation, help from somebody, a boundary, the courage to stop pretending. The Buddha's teaching does not ask us to become cold toward pain. It asks us not to become completely lost inside it. We can care for what is hurting without allowing it to define everything. Maybe the field looks dry today. Fine, do not burn it. Let it rest, give it water. Remove what is choking the roots. Then look again. Some things that appear finished are only waiting for different conditions. And some lives that seem broken are not asking to be abandoned. They are asking to be understood. So before the exhausted mind declares, this is my whole life, pause for a moment. Ask, what is actually here right now? Not forever, not the next 10 years, right now, because once we can name what is truly present, we no longer have to fight the whole world. We only have to enter one room inside ourselves and look honestly at what has been waiting there. And that room inside us, many people do not want to enter. We would rather clean the kitchen, fold the clothes, organize the drawer full of cables that belong to things we no longer own. Anything is better than sitting quietly and asking, what is happening in me? Because when the room becomes quiet, something may begin to speak. Anger, jealousy, fear, loneliness. The feeling that we are not important to someone. Immediately, the hand reaches for the phone, not because there is anything urgent. The mind simply does not want the meeting to begin. One video, then another. Then we open the refrigerator. We are not hungry. The mouth is just helping the mind avoid itself, but whatever we refuse to see usually does not disappear. It waits. Then it comes out somewhere else, in the voice, in the face, in the way we answer somebody who did not create the original pain. So practice begins by turning toward what is here. Not dramatically. We do not need to announce tonight, I will confront every wound from childhood. Maybe not tonight. Tonight, just notice the anger. Usually we say, I am angry. That sounds harmless. But if we repeat it long enough, anger begins to feel like our identity. I am an angry person. I have always been this way. This is simply who I am. Be careful. Anger is present, but anger is not the whole person. Try saying anger is here. That small change gives us a little space. If anger is here, then it came. And if it came, certain conditions helped it arise. Maybe the body is tired, maybe an old wound was touched, maybe somebody used a tone that belongs to a much older memory. The sentence happened today, but the reaction brought many years with it. This is why one small moment can feel so large. The present touched one place, and everything stored underneath stood up. So we do not deny the anger, we also do not immediately give it a job. We say, our anger is here. No, I should not feel this. Sometimes people become angry, then become angry because they are angry. Now the first fire has company. Mindfulness does not add punishment. Brings light. The chest is tight. The jaw is hard. The face feels hot. The same sentence is repeating in the mind. When we notice these things, anger is no longer the only thing in the room. Awareness is there too. Maybe awareness is still very small. Anger is sitting in the large chair, and awareness has only reached the doorway. Fine, let it stand there. Do not underestimate something because it is quiet. The old habit has practiced for many years. Awareness may have begun last week. Give it conditions. Breathe. Feel the feet on the floor. Notice the body before returning to the story. The story says, they never respect me. The body says, my chest is tight. The story can continue all night. The body brings us back to this breath, and when we stay there for a moment, sometimes we see what the anger was protecting. Under anger there may be hurt. Under hurt, fear. Under fear, a very simple wish. I want to matter to this person, but we do not know how to say that. So instead, we say, you only care about yourself. The heart wanted connection, the mouth created distance. This is why looking inward matters. If we see only anger, we prepare for battle. If we see the wound beneath it, compassion has somewhere to begin. That does not remove responsibility. If we speak cruelly, harm was still created. Understanding the cause does not erase the consequence. It only helps us stop repeating it blindly. We can say, yes, anger was present. I followed it. Now I want to understand how it gathered so much strength. That is practice, not becoming somebody who never feels anger. At first we notice after shouting, later, while shouting, then one day, before the sentence leaves the mouth, no light appears around the head. Nobody rings a temple bell, but one harmful sentence does not enter the world. That is already a change in karma, so do not be afraid of the room inside. There may be anger there, there may be grief, there may be things we have avoided for years, but awareness is also there. And once awareness enters, the old feeling no longer owns the entire house. Then the next question becomes very important. When this pain reaches the mouth, what kind of words will we allow it to become? And this is where the mouth becomes very important. Because many times the feeling is only beginning, it is still inside, still warm, still moving. Then the mouth gives it a form. One sentence comes out, and now the suffering has entered the relationship. Sometimes we say, but what I said was true. Yes, maybe it was true, but truth is not the only question. A knife can also be very clean. It still cuts. Some people sharpen the truth first, then say, I am only being honest. Honest may be kind. Not yet useful, we should look again. Suppose a child makes a mistake. We can say you made a mistake here, or we can say you never do anything right. One sentence points to an action, the other sentence gives the child an identity. And when a person hears the same identity for many years, the words begin to live inside them. Later, we ask why they have no confidence. Well, sometimes confidence has been receiving very poor conditions at home. The Buddha taught right speech because words create karma. They do not disappear when the sound ends. A harsh sentence may take only 3 seconds to say and remain in somebody else's mind for 30 years. That is why, before speaking, we have to look at the intention. Am I trying to help? Am I trying to be understood? Or am I trying to make this person feel what I felt? That last one is common. We are hurt, so we want to send the hurt back. Then we call it honesty. A husband says to his wife, you spend too much money. Maybe there is a real problem, but he waits until the whole family is sitting at the table, then says it with sarcasm. Now the conversation is not only about money. Shame has entered, pride has entered, old resentment has entered. The truth arrived with many guests. Timing matters. A good sentence at the wrong time can create a bad condition. Somebody comes home exhausted, and before they remove their shoes, we begin. We need to talk. Very dangerous sentence. Sometimes we do need to talk, but perhaps let them drink some water first. Wisdom knows that even truth needs a door through which it can enter, and the way we say something also matters. We can say, what you did hurt me, or you are exactly like your mother. Now the mother has entered the argument. Maybe she lives far away. Still, she has been invited. This is how one problem becomes five. Right speech keeps us close to what is actually happening. It does not use the whole history of a person as a weapon. It does not turn one mistake into their entire character. And silence is not always right speech either. Sometimes we say nothing, but the silence is punishment. The face changes, the door closes harder. Every movement says, "You should suffer until you understand." No words, but plenty of speech. So practice is not simply speaking less. It is speaking with more awareness. Maybe one breath before answering. Maybe lowering the voice. Maybe waiting until anger is no longer holding the microphone. Maybe saying, "I want to speak about this, but I do not want to speak from the part of me that wants to hurt you." That is already different. Of course, sometimes mindfulness arrives late. The sentence is already out. Then we return. We say, "What I wanted to say was important, but the way I said it caused harm. Let me try again." That is not weakness. That is the mind turning before the old karma becomes deeper. The same truth can open a person, or make them close completely. The same truth can bring light, or simply give anger a respectable name. So before we speak, perhaps we can ask, what condition am I trying to create with these words? And even then, good words may still fail if the person in front of us has never felt truly heard. Everybody wants to be heard. The husband wants to be heard. The wife wants to be heard. The parent wants to be heard. The child also wants to be heard. Sometimes the person who has been talking for 40 minutes still says, "Nobody listens to me." Very interesting. Two people can sit across from each other, both speaking, both explaining, and neither one has received anything. One person is talking. The other person looks quiet, but inside, the next answer is already being prepared. The mouth has stopped, the argument has not. Then the first person pauses for 1 second, and immediately we enter. "I understand, but you also usually," after the word "but," the understanding has ended. This is why listening is a practice. Not only hearing the sound. Listening means we are not using every sentence as material for our defense. In the Buddhist tradition, Avalokiteshvara listens deeply to the cries of the world, not only to words, to the suffering inside the words, because people do not always express pain beautifully. A child feels lonely and says, "You never care about me." A husband feels unappreciated and says, "Nothing I do is ever enough." A wife feels afraid and says, "You never think before making decisions." The sentence may be sharp, but beneath it there may be fear, there may be hurt, there may be a wish to be important to somebody. If we hear only the attack, we answer with another attack. Then both people protect themselves. The original pain remains sitting between them, untouched. Suppose your child comes home and says, "I hate this family." Immediately, the parent feels wounded. After everything we have done for you? Now the parent is speaking from pain. The child becomes defensive. The voice rises. 5 minutes later, nobody knows what happened at school. Maybe the child did not hate the family. Maybe somebody humiliated them that day. Maybe they were trying to say, "I feel alone." But the first sentence closed the door. What if the parent paused and asked, "What happened today?" Only that. No lecture yet, no defense. One question can create enough space for the real suffering to appear, and sometimes people do not need advice immediately. This is difficult, especially when we love them. They describe a problem and within 30 seconds we become an expert. "You should do this. Next time, do that." Why did you not say something sooner? Very helpful. The person came with pain and left with homework. Sometimes the kindest question is, do you want advice, or do you need me to listen? Because advice given too early often sounds like judgment. Before the person feels heard, every solution may carry the message, "You handled this badly, so let the suffering sit for a moment, not forever, just long enough that the person no longer has to fight to prove it is real." We can say, "I hear that you felt alone when I did that." Notice we have not agreed with every detail. We have recognized the pain. That recognition can soften a whole conversation. Many people become louder because they do not feel received. They say it once, nothing. They say it again, still nothing. Then the condition grows. The voice becomes stronger. The words become harsher. After a while, both people hear only the volume, Nobody hears the wound. This happens in families for years. One person asks for closeness through criticism. The other hears criticism and moves away. The distance makes the first person feel even less loved. So the criticism becomes stronger. One condition waters another. They may still love each other, but the conditions they create do not allow that love to be felt. Deep listening changes the direction. When the old accusation comes, we do not always have to give the old defense. Maybe we say, "I want to understand what hurt you most." Now the road is slightly different. The problem has not disappeared, but suffering has somewhere to land. Of course, listening also needs wisdom. If somebody is threatening, insulting, or refusing every boundary, compassion does not require us to remain there and receive harm. We can say, "I want to hear you, but we cannot continue like this. Let us return when we can speak without hurting each other." That is not abandoning compassion. That is compassion with clarity. The practice is not to listen without limit. It is to stop listening only for the part we can attack. To hear the fear beneath anger, the loneliness beneath criticism, the wish for connection beneath complaint. Sometimes the person in front of us is not asking us to solve their whole life. They are only asking us not to leave them alone inside one painful moment. And if we can hear that, something else may become possible. We may finally begin to hear the part of the story that is hardest to receive, the part that belongs to us. And when we finally listen deeply, something uncomfortable may happen. We begin to hear a part of the story we do not enjoy. Our part. The mind remembers very clearly what another person did. The date, the sentence, the tone, sometimes even what they were wearing. But when somebody asks, "And what did you do?" suddenly the memory becomes less reliable. Well, it is complicated. Yes. Our side is usually very complicated, but if we want suffering to change, we have to look at karma honestly. Karma is not only something mysterious from a past life. Karma is being created now. In intention, in speech, in what we repeat, in the way we treat people when nobody is watching. We speak harshly, and trust becomes thinner. We dismiss somebody often enough, and one day they stop sharing. We punish honesty, then complain that nobody tells us the truth. Little by little, we begin living inside the result of our own habits. Then we ask, why is everybody distant? Sometimes distance has been receiving conditions for a long time. There was a mother who often complained that her adult son rarely called. Whenever he did call, she said, "So you finally remembered you have a mother." He felt guilty. The next call became more difficult. Then he called less. The next time she said, "Do not worry about me. I am used to being forgotten." She wanted closeness, but the way she expressed loneliness created pressure. The pressure created avoidance. The avoidance made her feel even more abandoned. One condition fed another. Now, was everything her fault? No. The son also had responsibility. Her loneliness was real, but was she helping create the result she feared? A little. That little matters, because if the whole problem belongs to the other person, we can only wait. But if even a small part comes from what we repeatedly do, then there is somewhere to begin. This is why responsibility is different from blame. Blame says, "You are a bad person." Responsibility says, "This action had a consequence." Blame closes the heart. Responsibility opens the possibility of change. We can say, "I may have contributed to this. Not everything is my fault." That is another kind of confusion. Just, "I may have contributed." Sometimes that sentence is enough to let wisdom enter. Maybe our silence was not peaceful, it was punishment. Maybe our advice was not care, it was control. Maybe our honesty was anger wearing clean clothes. Maybe we kept saying, "I only want you to improve," but the other person heard nothing except, "You are never enough." When we see this clearly, we do not need to collapse. We do not have to become ashamed of our whole life. We only need to bow to the truth. Yes, this is what I have been creating. And then ask, what do I want to create now? Maybe we return to a coworker and say, "I realize I have answered you impatiently many times. I can understand why you stopped coming to me." Maybe we tell our child, "I asked you to be honest, but when you told me something difficult, I became angry. I see why you began hiding things." These are strong sentences. Defending ourselves is automatic. Seeing our karma requires courage. Of course, one honest sentence will not repair everything. We may apologize in the morning, then expect the relationship to become warm by dinner. Very hopeful, but distance may have been built over years. Trust also needs time, a different tone, a promise kept, a patient response when the old reaction would have been easier. One action, then another. That is how karma begins to turn. Not because the past disappears, because the pattern stops receiving the same conditions, and sometimes another person truly created the first wound. We did not choose it, we did not deserve it. Still, after the wound, the question remains, what am I creating now? More hatred, a clear boundary, the wish to heal, the wish to make somebody else suffer. The first harm may not belong to us, but the direction we give our heart afterward, that is where practice begins. So when pain appears, we can look in both directions. What did they do? That matters. And what have I been creating here? That matters too. The second question may be harder, but it returns something precious, the ability to change the next cause. Once we see our part, sometimes we have to return and apologize. That sounds simple, but apologizing is one of those things the ego knows how to decorate. Very well, we say, I am sorry, but you also hurt me. The apology lasted only a few seconds, then the defense came back to finish the speech. Or we say, I am sorry you felt that way. Notice, we did not say the action was harmful. We made the other person's feeling the problem. Very gentle words, very little responsibility. A real apology begins when we stop trying to escape what we did. We say, yes, that sentence was cruel. Yes, I embarrassed you. Yes, I used silence to punish you. No long explanation yet. No request for the other person to understand how tired we were. Maybe we were tired. Maybe we were under pressure. Those conditions help us understand the action, but they do not remove its consequence. In Buddhist practice, repentance means turning, not kneeling beautifully today, then walking in the same direction tomorrow. A person may apologize many times. They may cry, they may promise. For one evening, everything becomes gentle. Then the same anger returns and the same harm is created again. After a while, the family no longer trusts the words. Not because forgiveness is impossible, because the apology has not entered the person's way of living. There was a father who often shouted at home. Afterward, he felt guilty. He bought food for everyone. He became quiet and kind. Then 2 days later, the shouting returned. One evening, he finally noticed the anger before it reached the mouth. The chest tightened. The voice wanted to rise. The old sentence was ready this time, he said. I am too angry to speak well right now. Give me 10 minutes. I will come back. That pause was part of the apology. Perhaps more important than the words he had spoken the week before. Because now the turning had entered the moment where harm was usually created. This is what repentance looks like in daily life. We recognize the old road and choose not to walk all the way down it. Maybe we still step onto it. Maybe anger has already appeared, but we turn sooner. A wife may say, I am sorry I insulted you in front of the children. I was angry, but anger does not make that speech right. Next time I will wait until we are alone, clear, no performance, no hidden sentence saying you made me do it, and then she has to practice. Because the apology is not finished when the conversation ends. It continues the next time the same condition appears. Of course, the other person may not forgive immediately. This is difficult for the ego. We apologize, then wait. They are still hurt. After a while, we become impatient. I already said sorry. What else do you want? Now the apology has become a demand. We want the wound to heal according to our schedule, but trust may have been damaged over years. It will not always return because of one sincere evening. A seed planted this morning does not become a tree before dinner. Give it conditions, consistency, a different tone, promises that are kept when nobody is praising us, and sometimes the relationship may not return at all. The other person may choose distance. We still have to change. Repentance is not a bargain. I will become better if you forgive me. We turn because we have seen that the old way creates suffering, even if we cannot recover what was lost. We do not need to keep becoming the person who creates the same harm. So an apology can be simple. I see what I did. I understand that it hurt you. I am sorry. I am working to respond differently. Then let the life support the words, because the deepest apology is not always the one spoken after harm. Sometimes it is the next moment, when the same anger rises, the same sharp sentence comes near the mouth, and this time we do not give it the same conditions. That is where Samhoi becomes real, not in the performance, in the turning, and after we have turned, another difficulty appears. We may stop repeating the harm, but still continue carrying the wound. Sometimes the harm has stopped, but the argument continues inside us. The person is not there. The conversation ended long ago. Still, every night we explain our side again, and somehow, the person in our mind remains very unreasonable. Of course, we are supplying all of their lines. This is what clinging can look like, not only holding on to a person. Sometimes we hold on to the injury, to being right, to the hope that one day they will finally understand how much they hurt us. Maybe they should understand, but while we are waiting, what is happening to the heart? There is a story about someone who moved away from an old house. The house was sold, another family moved in, the locks were changed, but this person kept the old key for years. It remained in a drawer. One day the person returned, stood before the old door, and tried the key. It did not open. Tried again, still nothing, then became angry with the door. This key used to work. Yes, it used to work, but this is no longer your door. Many of us do the same thing with the past we stand in front of today, holding an old key, and become disappointed because today will not open the way yesterday did. Maybe the key is an old promise. Maybe it is betrayal. Maybe it is the apology we never received. Maybe it is the sentence, one day they will regret what they did. We keep it close. We touch it often. We tell the story again. At first, the pain was real. It may still be real, but every time we return to it with anger, we give it another condition. The wound begins to shape the way we see new people. Someone arrives with kindness, but we meet them with the suspicion created by somebody else. A new door appears, and we try the old key. Then we say, "See, nothing ever works." But perhaps we are asking the present to answer for the past. Letting go does not mean what happened was acceptable. It does not mean inviting a harmful person back. It does not mean removing a boundary that protects us. Sometimes letting go includes saying, "You cannot continue walking with me," but after we close that door, do we also need to remain behind it for 10 years still arguing? Sometimes we think if I forgive, they win. Win what? The chance to live inside our mind without paying anything? Forgiveness is not always reconciliation. Trust may need to be rebuilt, and sometimes trust should not be rebuilt. Forgiveness means the pain no longer decides every new moment. It means we stop feeding the wish that another person must suffer before we are allowed to be free. Because when our peace depends on their punishment, we are still tied to them. Only now, the rope is made from resentment. This is not something we release once and never touch again. The old key may return to the hand. A song brings it back. A place, a photograph. One familiar tone in another person's voice. Suddenly, the whole story is present. Practice does not say you should be over this by now. That sentence creates more suffering. Practice says, I am holding it again. Then we look gently. What does this key open today? Maybe grief, maybe anger, maybe the need to be understood. We allow the feeling to be there. But we do not have to walk back to the old door. Perhaps we put the key down for one evening. Tomorrow, we may pick it up again. Then we put it down again. This is often how letting go happens. Not one great spiritual moment. A small decision repeated. Not checking their page tonight. Not telling the story to one more person only to become angry again. Not using one old betrayal to judge a new relationship. Every time we stop feeding it, the old condition becomes a little weaker, and the hand begins to open. When the hand opens, there is space for something else. Not because the past vanished, because the past is no longer holding every part of the present. So maybe we do not have to ask only, why did they do this to me? Maybe we can also ask, what am I still carrying that no longer opens any door, but continues to keep my hand closed? And when that hand finally loosens, even a little, we should be careful what we place inside it next. When the hand begins to open, we cannot leave it empty forever. If we stop feeding resentment, what will we feed instead? This is where practice becomes very ordinary, not dramatic, not a great spiritual experience. Maybe just looking up when someone enters the room, maybe putting the phone down while they are speaking, maybe saying thank you for something we have received so many times that we no longer notice it. People often think love should continue by itself. Two people care for each other. Then work becomes busy. Children need attention. Bills arrive. The roof leaks. Somebody cannot sleep. Somebody's back hurts. Little by little, the relationship receives less care. Not because there is no love. Love has simply not been given many conditions lately. One person comes home. The other is cooking. The first question is, what are we eating? No greeting, no eye contact, only the menu. Very warm relationship. Then one day they say, we are not close anymore. But closeness is also cultivated. It does not remain fresh simply because it was fresh 15 years ago. We understand this with a phone. The battery reaches 10%. Immediately, we find a charger. A relationship reaches 10%, and we say, it should be fine. Why? Because we assume love can survive without attention. But wholesome seeds also need water. Sometimes the water is small. Did you sleep well? Thank you for doing that. You look tired. Are you okay? I know you have heard this story before, but can I tell you again? And sometimes the practice is listening to that story again. Yes, the details may change slightly each time. Still, we listen, because one day we may wish we could hear it once more. These actions do not look spiritual. No incense, no temple bell. Nobody says, excellent mindfulness. But this is where a life is shaped. In the kitchen, in the car, at the table, in the way we answer someone who is already tired. There was a woman who often complained that her husband never expressed love. He was not good with words. Every morning, he woke early and made coffee for both of them. He warmed her cup first because he knew she disliked cold coffee, but because it happened every day. She stopped seeing it. She was waiting for the sentence, I love you. The sentence mattered, of course, but the coffee was also speaking very quietly. Many blessings become invisible because they remain. The person who calls, the meal on the table, the friend who listens, the parent who asks whether we arrived safely. Sometimes we understand the value only after the condition is gone. Gratitude helps us see before losing, not pretending everything is perfect. Not forcing ourselves to be grateful for harm. It simply keeps one difficult thing from covering everything else. Maybe a relationship has problems, but is there still effort? Is there still care? Is somebody still trying to return? Notice that. Give it water, because the mind becomes skilled at finding whatever it repeatedly searches for. If we look only for what is missing, absence becomes very easy to see. If we also notice what is still alive, the heart becomes able to receive it. One evening, a mother came home exhausted. Her child had left shoes in the doorway again. The old sentence was ready. How many times do I have to tell you? Then she looked up. The child was sitting very quietly, not the usual kind of quiet. She paused and asked, what happened? The shoes still needed to be moved, but now she saw the child before the problem. The child said, I failed my test. One pause and a door remained open. Without that pause, the child might have gone to the room and said nothing. This is how compassion becomes practical. We see what is in front of us, before reacting only to what annoys us. Different life is often built this way. One kind sentence, one promise kept, one restrained reaction, one act of care nobody praises, then another. At first, the new habit may feel weak. We have practiced criticism for many years, and appreciation began last Tuesday. Give it time. Do not dig up the seed every morning to ask why it is not a tree. Just keep watering it, because whatever receives our attention every day slowly becomes the atmosphere of our life, and after some time, something wholesome begins to feel more natural. But then, usually at the moment we think we have changed, the old habit returns. And yes, the old habit usually returns right when we begin to feel proud. We think, I understand now, I am more patient, I have changed. Then one difficult morning comes, somebody says one sentence. The body is tired, the mind is already full, and suddenly the old anger appears with great confidence. Same voice, same reaction, same sentence we promised we would never say again. Immediately, another thought comes. See, nothing has changed. Be careful. That thought is also an old habit. We practice patience for 3 weeks, then expect it to be stronger than anger we have practiced for 20 years. Very ambitious. The old road is wide because we have walked it many times. It knows us well. One sharp tone, one familiar look, one moment of feeling ignored, and the feet begin moving before awareness understands where we are going. This is habit energy, something repeated so often, it almost seems to move by itself. Someone criticizes us, and the chest tightens before we hear the full sentence. Someone becomes quiet, and the mind says they are going to leave me. Someone corrects one mistake, and we hear you are never good enough. The present moment may be small, but the old habit brings a large history. So practice is not the promise that the reaction will never arise again. Practice is recognizing it sooner. At first we notice after the harm, we go home and think, I should not have said that. Later we notice while speaking, the sentence is already halfway out, but awareness has arrived. Then one day we notice before the mouth opens, the jaw tightens, the voice wants to rise. The mind begins gathering evidence. The archive is opening again, that moment matters. The anger is still there, but now anger is not alone. Awareness has entered. Maybe awareness is still weak. Maybe it only says, not yet. That may be enough, not yet. Do not send the message yet. Do not make the decision yet. Do not add one more sentence only because the mind wants the last word. Sometimes 3 seconds of delay can save 3 days of suffering. A man had a habit of becoming silent whenever he felt hurt. Not calm silence, punishing silence. His wife would ask, "What is wrong?" He would say, "Nothing," but the face said, "Plenty." The door closed harder. The spoon was placed on the table with great spiritual intensity for 2 or 3 days. The whole house suffered. He knew this habit, he wanted to stop. Then one evening the old silence began again. He walked into another room. After 10 minutes he noticed. He returned and said, "I am still hurt. I cannot speak clearly yet, but I do not want to punish you by disappearing. Give me some time, I will come back." The habit had not vanished, it had already begun. But he saw it before it became 3 days. That is transformation, not perfection. We often imagine spiritual progress should look impressive. Nothing disturbs us, people insult us. The car breaks down, the internet stops working, and we sit there smiling like a statue. Perhaps one day, but for now, notice the smaller changes. You recovered in 1 hour instead of 1 week. You wanted to send the cruel message, but waited until morning. You started telling the old story, then stopped and said, "I do not want to water this again. These things matter." Every time the old sequence is interrupted, one condition weakens. Every time a different response appears, another condition grows stronger. Some days the old habit will still carry us away. Then we return, we see the harm, we apologize if needed, and we look at what fed it. Were we exhausted? Had we stored resentment all week? Did we refuse to speak when the issue was still small? Then explode when the condition became deep? This is not making excuses. It is learning where the habit finds food, and please do not feed self-hatred afterward. The mind says, "You did it again, you will never change." Do not believe every sentence spoken in disappointment. Say instead, "Yes, the old habit returned. I see it. What can I stop feeding now?" That question brings us back to practice. The road does not disappear simply because we stepped away once, but each time we return sooner, the new road becomes easier to find. And one day, perhaps without noticing exactly when, the old reaction still comes, but it no longer controls the whole journey. That is when we begin to understand something important. The outside life may still look familiar, but the mind living inside it is no longer exactly the same. The outside life may still look familiar. Same house, same work, same family, same neighbor who closes the car door, as though the whole street needs an announcement. Nothing dramatic has happened. But inside, the mind is not meeting everything in exactly the same way, and that small difference matters. Sometimes we think transformation must be visible immediately. New city, New job, new relationship, maybe new clothes, maybe a new haircut. Then we look in the mirror and think, yes, a new life. But 3 days later, the same anger is still there, only the hair has changed. In the Dharma, change often begins much more quietly. The same person speaks. But this time we wait before answering. The same fear comes. But this time we recognize it before believing everything it says. The same problem appears, but we do not bring every old wound into it. Only one condition changes still. What follows may also change. This is dependent arising. Nothing appears alone. A painful argument does not come from one sentence only. There may be tiredness, pride, old resentment, the need to win, a fear of being ignored. Those conditions meet, and the whole reaction rises. But if even one condition is different, the result does not have to unfold in exactly the same way. Maybe the other person still speaks harshly. Maybe we are still tired. But this time, we do not answer immediately. The old sequence is interrupted. The fire finds less wood. There was a woman caring for her elderly mother. Every evening, the mother asked, "What day is it?" The daughter answered. A few minutes later, the mother asked again. At first, the daughter tried to be patient, but after many weeks, exhaustion entered her voice. "I already told you." The mother became quiet. The daughter felt guilty. The next evening, the same question returned. Nothing outside had changed. Her mother's memory was still fading. The daughter was still tired. But this time, before answering, she looked at her mother's face, and suddenly she saw something underneath the question. Her mother was afraid. She was not only asking for the date. She was trying to understand where she was in time. So the daughter said, "It is Tuesday evening, you are at home. I am here with you." A different answer, a different condition. The mother relaxed. A few minutes later, she asked again. Practice was not finished, but the moment had changed. The same life, received by a different mind. This does not mean compassion removes exhaustion. The daughter still needed rest. She still needed help. Understanding does not erase human limits, but it changes the quality of the moment. And when the quality of many moments changes, the life made from those moments begins to change too. This is why impermanence is not only sad. We hear impermanence and think of loss. Youth passes, people leave, things break. Yes, but impermanence also means anger is not permanent. A habit is not permanent. The way we relate to somebody is not permanent. Even a mind that has suffered for many years is not carved in stone. If suffering arose through conditions, then when conditions change, suffering can also change. Maybe slowly, maybe not completely, but the direction can turn. The old habit says, "This is just who I am." Impermanence says, "This is what has been repeated." Those are not the same. What has been repeated can be seen. What can be seen can stop receiving some of its old food. And something else can begin receiving conditions, patience, clarity, compassion. At first, the new way may feel unnatural. Of course, the old road is wide. The new road may be only a narrow path through the grass. Sometimes we lose it, then we find it again. We take another step after a while. The path becomes easier to see, so maybe your life still looks ordinary. The responsibilities remain. The difficult person has not become easy. The laundry continues to return, but if the mind pauses sooner, if the mouth creates less harm, if the heart stops watering every old resentment, then this is not exactly the same life anymore. The outside may be familiar, but the causes being planted inside it have begun to change. And when the causes change, the fruit cannot remain exactly the same. So perhaps we should stop waiting for another life to begin. This life is already giving us the place, the person, the difficulty. The next moment, everything needed for the turning is here. So perhaps the lesson is not that we need another life. Maybe we do not need another house, another family, another version of ourselves. Maybe we need to look more carefully at what we are nourishing in the life already here, because every day we are giving conditions to something. One thought repeated, one resentment protected, one sharp sentence spoken again. That is how suffering becomes strong. But a different direction also begins with small things. One breath before answering, one moment of listening, one honest apology, one boundary spoken without hatred, one old story we decide not to feed tonight. Nothing dramatic, but do not underestimate a small cause. The old road was also built one step at a time, so when the old habit returns, notice it. Do not hate yourself. Do not say, "This is simply who I am." Say, "This is what I have practiced for a long time." Then practice something else. Maybe there is still an old key in your hand, a painful memory, a need to be right. A person you are still arguing with, inside your mind. You do not have to pretend the key never mattered. Maybe it once opened something important, but look again. Does it open anything now? Or is it only keeping your hand closed? If it opens nothing, perhaps you can put it down only for today. Then use that hand for something else. Make the call, offer the apology. Prepare the meal, touch the shoulder of someone who is tired. Sit quietly and listen without preparing your defense. This is how awakening enters ordinary life, not only beneath a temple roof. It enters the kitchen, the workplace, the difficult conversation, the moment anger rises and does not receive the mouth. Tomorrow, the same life may still be waiting, the same responsibilities, the same unfinished problems. But perhaps the mind meeting them will be a little more awake. And that is enough for a new direction to begin. Because when the causes change, the conditions change. When the conditions change, the fruit also begins to change. So do not wait for another life. Do not wait to become another person. Begin here, with this breath, with this mind, with the next condition you choose to create. And perhaps one day, you will look at the life you once wanted to escape and realize it became the very place where you finally learned how to wake up.